My name is Daniel Parker. I'm 38 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years building a career in wealth management. I've lived in the same city my entire adult life, climbing the corporate ladder with nothing but dedication, integrity, and a relentless drive to succeed. I thought I was untouchable, respected by my clients, trusted by my colleagues, and valued by my boss. I was wrong. It started like any other Monday. I walked into the office early, coffee in hand, reviewing the client reports for the week. My calendar was packed, but I thrived under pressure. I prided myself on knowing every client personally, their families, their goals, even their fears about investments. I thought that level of care set me apart, but apparently, it didn't set me apart enough. Around mid-morning, my boss called me into his office. Mark Reynolds, a man who had always been distant but polite, sat behind his polished mahogany desk, flipping through a folder as if I wasn't even there. I greeted him, trying to keep my tone casual. That's when he dropped the line that shattered my confidence in one breath. "You know, Daniel, you're replaceable." I froze. I repeated the words in my mind, hoping I misheard him. "Replaceable?" I asked. He nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, we could get someone else tomorrow. Honestly, you're good, but not indispensable. Clients like you, sure, but they'll work with someone else. Don't take it personally, I couldn't believe it." I'd spent years cultivating trust, handling accounts worth millions, staying late, fielding calls at all hours, and he told me I was replaceable? A chill ran down my spine. My stomach knotted, my hands tightened into fists, and for the first time in years, I felt that knot of fear. The fear that maybe all my hard work wasn't worth anything. I left his office without another word, my mind racing. Each step back to my desk felt heavier than the last. Around me, the office buzzed with the usual morning chatter, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't focus on emails or client reports. All I could think about was that sentence, replaceable. That afternoon, I sat in my office alone, staring at my computer screen. I replayed every interaction with my boss, every meeting, every late night spent fixing issues for clients. Could all of that really be dismissed so casually? I realized something in that moment. I wasn't just angry. I was awake. I was alert. I was seeing things clearly for the first time. And then my phone rang. It was a client I had worked with for nearly a decade. Their voice was warm, familiar, and, surprisingly, urgent. "Daniel," they said, "we need to talk about our accounts. Are you free today?" That call changed everything. That call was the first ripple in a wave that would soon turn into a tsunami. My boss thought I was replaceable, but he had no idea just how powerful loyalty could be, or how far it would go when someone finally realized their worth. I grew up believing that hard work always paid off. My parents weren't rich, far from it. My dad worked as an electrician, my mom was a school librarian, both of them working long hours just to make ends meet. They never had a moment to spare, but they taught me one thing clearly. If you do the right thing, people will notice. That lesson became my foundation. When I graduated from college, I jumped straight into the world of finance. I wasn't the most outgoing person, but I was meticulous, disciplined, and reliable. While my peers chased flashy titles and high-risk opportunities, I focused on building relationships. I believed that trust, consistency, and patience were far more valuable than short-term gains. And for a long time, that belief seemed to pay off. My first few years at the firm were exhausting. I arrived before anyone else and left long after the office lights were off. I memorized every client's preferences, every portfolio detail, every financial nuance that could make a difference. I celebrated my clients' successes as if they were my own, helping a family buy their first home, guiding a small business through turbulent markets, even managing retirements with surgical precision. By the time I hit 10 years in, I had dozens of high-value clients, each trusting me with millions of dollars. I thought I had built something unshakable, but my personal life told a different story. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, and countless family dinners. My friends drifted away because I couldn't make time for them. Relationships failed because my mind was always on work. And yet, I convinced myself that the sacrifices were worth it. I told myself I was building a future where I could finally relax, enjoy the rewards, and take pride in the life I had created. And then there was Mark Reynolds, my boss. I had worked under him for 8 years, climbing the ranks slowly but surely. I thought he valued my dedication. He would occasionally compliment me, ask for my input, and include me in strategic meetings. But the truth was, I was always walking on a tightrope. One misstep, and the whole structure could collapse. I ignored it, too focused on the relationships I had cultivated and the financial success I had achieved for my clients. At home, I lived modestly, almost frugally. Despite the money I managed, I had a small but comfortable apartment, a reliable car, and a few hobbies that helped me unwind: photography, running, and reading biographies of successful leaders. My life looked simple from the outside, but I had a secret sense of pride. I wasn't flashy, but I was building a reputation, and in my mind, that reputation was solid. I also had a few close colleagues who I considered friends. We would share lunches, exchange ideas, and commiserate over long days. I thought these relationships were genuine, that there was mutual respect and camaraderie. Little did I know, loyalty in the corporate world was more fragile than I ever imagined. One thing I can say without exaggeration is that I was loyal, not just to my clients, but to the company as a whole. I defended decisions I didn't always agree with, stayed late to fix mistakes that weren't mine, and took blame quietly when errors occurred. I believed loyalty was a two-way street. I thought it would be recognized, valued, and, most importantly, reciprocated. Financially, I had also made smart moves. I saved diligently, invested wisely, and avoided unnecessary risks. My clients' successes often mirrored my own, and I began to envision a life where I could finally enjoy the fruits of my labor: a nice home, perhaps a vacation property, and a sense of security I had never known as a child. And that's why, when Mark said I was replaceable, it hit me harder than any market crash or client complaint ever could. I had built my entire life, my identity, my pride, my future, around the belief that hard work and loyalty meant something. I had believed that if you earned trust, treated people with respect, and delivered results, no one could simply erase you. I realize now that what I thought was stability was only the illusion of it. The world I had built, my career, my routine, my reputation, all seemed solid on the surface, but underneath, the foundation was vulnerable, and the very person who had the power to shake it had done just that in a single sentence: "You're replaceable." That moment made me question everything. It made me rethink the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the personal moments I had missed. But it also forced me to see something I hadn't fully realized. I wasn't actually replaceable. Not to my clients, not to the people whose trust I had earned, and certainly not to myself. In hindsight, the life I thought I had wasn't a failure. It was a preparation. Every late night, every careful decision, every act of loyalty had been quietly building an arsenal of relationships and credibility that I didn't fully appreciate at the time. And now, that hidden strength would become the foundation for what came next. A carefully planned, completely unstoppable response to betrayal. It started slowly. The kind of creeping doubt that no one notices at first. A missed email, a client returning a call later than usual, a casual remark from a colleague that didn't quite sit right. At first, I brushed it off. Stress, I told myself. Busy schedules. Everyone makes mistakes. But as the days turned into weeks, the small anomalies began to pile up, forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. My clients, the very people I had spent years cultivating trust with, began acting strangely. Meetings were rescheduled without explanation. Calls went unanswered. I noticed subtle changes in tone, a hesitation in their voices when they addressed me. And then there were the documents. Investment statements that didn't quite match my records, accounts that seemed to shift slightly in ways I couldn't explain. At the office, Mark's behavior changed too. He started scheduling meetings without inviting me, passing off my recommendations as if they were his own. Small, almost imperceptible gestures at first, a nod here, a comment there. But together they painted a disturbing picture. I began to feel like I was standing in a room that everyone else had already left, watching the door close behind them, silently locking me out. I didn't confront anyone. That wasn't my style. I had learned early in my career that silence could be more powerful than words. Observation was a weapon, and I was ready to wield it carefully. I started keeping meticulous notes. Every call, every meeting, every irregularity. I cross-checked records, verified transactions, and began quietly asking questions without revealing my growing suspicion. One afternoon, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. A long-term client, someone I had advised for over a decade, had been unusually distant. When I asked if they wanted to review their portfolio, they hesitated, then quickly said, "I think we'll speak to someone else for now." I smiled politely, hiding the shock rising in my chest. They didn't realize it yet, but this was a turning point. It wasn't just the clients. Colleagues I had once trusted started sidestepping me, offering suggestions I had made only minutes earlier as if they had come up with them themselves. Every day, it felt like I was losing ground in the place I had built with sweat and careful strategy. I began to see that my boss's words, replaceable, were not just empty threats. They were a declaration, a prelude to erasure. The anxiety was suffocating. At night, I lay awake replaying conversations, rereading emails, analyzing meetings. Every interaction now carried potential hidden meanings. My mind became a constant scanner, picking up inconsistencies others wouldn't notice. A glance too long at a file, a hesitation before a handshake, a slightly different phrasing in an email. All signs of something shifting beneath the surface. Yet, I didn't let anyone know. I kept my composure, smiled in meetings, laughed at jokes, and carried on as if nothing had changed. If they thought I was unaware, they were wrong. I was fully aware, more aware than I had ever been in my life. Every small betrayal, every minor slight, became ammunition. I was quietly preparing, even as everyone else thought I was oblivious. The final piece fell into place one evening. I had stayed late at the office, going through client account statements, checking for discrepancies. That's when I noticed a series of large transfers being discussed without my knowledge. Millions of dollars were being moved, and my clients, the ones I had nurtured for years, were quietly being redirected to other advisors. I could hardly believe it. I felt a combination of disbelief, anger, and clarity. It was in that moment that I realized I had been undervalued my entire career. My loyalty, my dedication, my sleepless nights, my relentless attention to detail. All of it had been taken for granted. And now, as the quiet betrayal unfolded before me, I understood that I had two choices: remain a victim or become the force no one expected. I spent the next few days piecing together the extent of the unraveling. Each client account I reviewed, each conversation I revisited, each subtle sign of collusion painted a clear picture. My boss and certain colleagues had underestimated me. They believed I was replaceable, that I could be brushed aside without consequence. But they didn't know the full depth of what I had built: trust, credibility, and relationships that could withstand corporate maneuvering. By the end of that week, I had a map of the betrayal. I knew which clients were being approached, which accounts were at risk, and which colleagues were actively undermining me. I wasn't just observing anymore. I was strategizing. Each piece of information became part of a larger plan. I began drafting a mental blueprint for how I would respond, how I would reclaim not only my standing, but also the respect, loyalty, and recognition I had earned. Through it all, I maintained a calm exterior. No one suspected the storm brewing beneath my composed demeanor. I continued to answer calls, meet clients, and attend meetings with a polite smile. But inside, I was alive with purpose, fueled by a simmering determination. Each slight, each betrayal, each dismissive comment from my boss became fuel for the fire I would eventually unleash. The unraveling had done more than reveal betrayal. It had revealed strength. It had awakened a side of me I hadn't fully known. A side capable of planning, executing, and winning with precision. And as I left the office one night, the city lights stretching across the skyline, I knew that this was not the end of my story. It was the turning point. The quiet observation, the silent suspicion, the rising tension. All of it was setting the stage for the next chapter, the moment I would no longer be underestimated. I realized that the real battle wasn't just about clients or accounts or even my reputation. It was about proving to myself and to everyone who doubted me that I was never replaceable. And with that clarity, I began to prepare for the inevitable confrontation that would change everything. For weeks, I lived in silence, documenting every odd shift, every hidden email, every client interaction that didn't sit right. Suspicion had become second nature to me, but suspicion isn't proof. It gnaws at you, unsettles you, makes you doubt yourself. What I needed was certainty. And certainty came on a Wednesday afternoon. I had scheduled a quarterly review with one of my largest clients, a family-owned company whose accounts I had personally managed for over a decade. These people weren't just clients. They were practically family. I'd attended their weddings, birthdays, even stood by their side during medical crises. They trusted me with everything they had, nearly $12 million in assets. But when I walked into the conference room that day, something felt different. They looked uneasy, exchanging glances as I laid out the reports. The patriarch, a man I deeply respected, finally cleared his throat. "Daniel," he said carefully, "your boss. He's been telling us you're on your way out, that the firm has better people lined up. He said we should start transitioning." The words hit me like a freight train. My chest tightened. My hands froze on the binder. Outwardly, I forced myself to remain calm. "I see," I said evenly. "And how do you feel about that?" The man leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "We don't want anyone else." We want you. If you leave, our accounts leave with you. Do you understand? There it was. Undeniable proof. Not whispers, not suspicions, not subtle signs. My boss wasn't just undermining me quietly. He was actively pushing my clients away, hoping to strip me of the very relationships I had spent my life building. And in doing so, he had overlooked one critical fact. Those clients weren't loyal to the company. They were loyal to me. I felt a fire ignite in my chest, not the wild, reckless fire of anger, but the steady, consuming burn of resolve. At that moment, everything became clear. My boss thought I was replaceable, but he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating the value of trust. Trust isn't written in contracts. It's built in late-night calls, in honest advice, in years of consistency. And that kind of trust doesn't transfer with the stroke of a pen. I looked my clients in the eyes and nodded. "Thank you for telling me," I said. I won't forget it. As I walked out of that building, the city air felt different. The noise of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, the hum of life all faded into the background. My focus narrowed to a single point. It was time. No more suspicion, no more quiet observation. The betrayal was confirmed, and my path forward was crystal clear. That evening, sitting at my desk with the city skyline glowing outside my window, I reviewed every file, every note, every piece of evidence I had collected. For the first time, I saw it not as fragments, but as a weapon. A weapon I could use not just to defend myself, but to dismantle the false narrative my boss had built. And I didn't feel broken anymore. I didn't feel small. I didn't even feel angry. What I felt was a strange, calm certainty. The kind of certainty you get when you've been pushed to the edge, looked over the abyss, and realized you're not falling. You're climbing. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream into the silence or replay his words in my head. Instead, I opened a new folder on my computer labeled "It's Strategy" and began mapping out the steps I would take. Every battle needs a trigger. That meeting was mine. It wasn't just the confirmation of betrayal. It was the realization that I had something far more powerful than any boss, any title, or any company could strip away. I had loyalty, and loyalty, once tested, becomes unbreakable. As midnight approached, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen filled with notes, arrows, and names. My boss thought he was pulling the strings, but the truth was simple. He had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. Because when clients worth millions declare they'll follow you anywhere, you stop being replaceable. You become inevitable. And from that night forward, I wasn't just planning a defense, I was planning an execution. Quiet, calculated, and devastatingly effective. I didn't storm into his office. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't quit in a blaze of anger, because that's exactly what he wanted me to do. Instead, I walked out of that client meeting with a calm resolve I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I saw everything clearly. If he believed I was replaceable, I would show him how wrong he was, quietly, carefully, and with precision. The very next day, I started reaching out to a few of my longest-term clients, but never in a way that looked suspicious. I didn't tell them I was planning to leave. I didn't even hint at betrayal. All I did was listen. I asked how they felt about their accounts, whether they were satisfied with the service they were receiving, whether they felt heard. And the responses confirmed what I already knew. They weren't loyal to the firm. They were loyal to me. "Daniel, wherever you go, we go," one client said. That sentence burned itself into my memory. Another echoed it days later. We trust you, not the logo on the wall. Each word was fuel. Each assurance tightened the foundation of the plan I was building. But loyalty alone wasn't enough. I had to be smart. Moving accounts worth millions required legality, discretion, and timing. So I contacted a lawyer I trusted, an estate specialist I'd worked with years before. We met in a quiet coffee shop, away from the office, away from prying eyes. I explained the situation in careful, neutral terms. He listened without interrupting, then leaned forward and said, "If your clients come to you on their own, Daniel, you're in the clear. Just don't solicit while you're under contract. Document everything, prepare quietly, and when the time comes, be ready to act." That was all I needed. I wasn't going to poach. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to prepare. I began researching other firms late at night, after everyone else had left the office. I wasn't looking for the biggest name or the flashiest brand. I wanted a place that valued people, that respected relationships, that wouldn't see me as a disposable cog. Within weeks, I had 3 offers lined up. All I had to do was decide where to land once the dominoes began to fall. At the same time, I started gathering what I called insurance. Every email where my boss undermined me, every meeting I was excluded from, every client transfer that was mishandled without my knowledge, I copied, archived, and organized until I had a file thick enough to shield me from any accusation he might throw. If he tried to paint me as disloyal or incompetent, the truth would be sitting right there in black and white. Meanwhile, at the office, I played my role perfectly. I smiled in meetings. I nodded at his remarks. I even congratulated him when he claimed credit for work I had done. He thought my silence was submission. He thought I was shrinking into the background, accepting his words about being replaceable. But every time he looked down on me, I was one step further ahead in my plan. I also began planting small seeds with my clients, never overstepping but letting them know subtly that change might be on the horizon. When they hinted at their dissatisfaction with the firm, I didn't argue. I just listened and I tucked their words away. The less I said, the stronger their commitment became. They didn't need persuasion. They already knew where their loyalty lay. There were nights when the weight of it all nearly crushed me. I would sit at my kitchen table, papers spread out in front of me, the city lights glowing outside, and wonder if I was ready for what was coming. This wasn't just about walking away from a job. It was about dismantling years of manipulation, about reclaiming my dignity, about proving not just to him, but to myself, that I was far more than he ever gave me credit for. And slowly, the fear turned into something sharper. Focus, discipline, confidence. I began rehearsing conversations in my mind, anticipating his reactions, imagining every scenario. If he tried to block me legally, I had evidence. If he tried to replace me overnight, I had client loyalty. If he tried to smear my name, I had proof of his lies. No matter what move he made, I had a counter. The day he told me I was replaceable, he thought he was ending my career. What he didn't realize was that he had freed me. He had lit a fire I didn't even know still burned inside me. Every morning I walked into that office, I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a strategist, a planner, a man quietly preparing to take back everything he tried to steal. By the time weeks turned into months, the plan was airtight. Clients were ready. Lawyers were ready. New firms were ready. And me? I was more ready than I had ever been in my life. One evening, as I sat staring at the skyline, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. It wasn't about humiliating him or shouting, "I told you so." It was about justice. It was about showing the difference between replaceable and irreplaceable. It was about reminding myself and everyone else that trust can't be faked, loyalty can't be bought, and respect has to be earned. My boss thought he was in control, but the truth was simple. He had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. And when the time came to execute, I wouldn't need to raise my voice or make a scene. I would let the numbers speak. I would let the client speak. I would let the silence I had cultivated for months erupt into the loudest statement of all. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't in words or anger. It's in patience, precision, and the quiet confidence of knowing that the moment you move, the entire world shifts with you. The day it all came together didn't start with fireworks. It started quietly, like any other. I got to the office early, poured myself a coffee, and checked my calendar. On the surface, nothing was unusual, but beneath the routine, every detail had already been set in motion. I had chosen this day carefully. The contracts were ready. The new firm was ready. My lawyer was ready. And most importantly, my clients were ready. The first domino fell at 9 a.m. sharp. A longtime client walked into the lobby, folder in hand, and asked to see me. They weren't there for small talk. They were there to sign. One signature, then another, then another. Millions of dollars in assets legally shifted under my management at a new firm. By noon, 3 more had followed. By the end of the week, nearly every client I had cultivated over the last decade had filed the same paperwork. The number was staggering. $41 million. $41 million in trust, in loyalty, in relationships my boss had mocked as meaningless. And now, every cent of it was walking out the door with me. When he found out, the look on his face was something I'll never forget. He stormed into my office, slamming the door behind him. His voice was sharp, loud, dripping with anger. "What the hell is going on, Daniel? What did you do?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even stand. I looked him dead in the eyes and said calmly, "I didn't do anything. They chose. And you underestimated me." He ranted, he threatened, he accused. But every word was hollow. The paperwork was signed. The accounts were gone. The clients had spoken with their actions, and no amount of shouting could change that. In the days that followed, the fallout was brutal for him. Colleagues whispered in the halls. Emails poured in from furious executives demanding explanations. The company scrambled to cover the losses, but the truth was undeniable. The man who called me replaceable had just lost the very foundation of his business. And me? I walked out of that building with nothing but a small box of personal belongings and more dignity than I had carried in years. There was no need for a dramatic exit or parting words. The silence was enough. At the new firm, I was welcomed not as a pawn, but as a partner. My clients transitioned smoothly, their loyalty unwavering. Every meeting was a reminder of what I had built, not a collection of accounts, but relationships forged through honesty, consistency, and respect. The number on the ledger mattered, yes, but what mattered more was the trust behind it. I'll never forget the first time I sat in my new office, looking at the signed transfer documents stacked neatly on the desk. $41 million. A number my old boss would choke on if he thought about it too long. And yet, I didn't feel rage or vindication. What I felt was peace. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always come with shouting or gloating. Sometimes The most devastating revenge is quiet. It's walking away with everything they said you'd never have. It's proving, not with words, but with results, that you were never replaceable. A week later, I ran into one of my former colleagues at a coffee shop. They looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Daniel, do you know what they're calling you at the office?" I shook my head. The $41 million man. I laughed for the first time in a long time. Not because of the money itself, but because the very thing my boss tried to erase, my value, my worth, my relationships, had become undeniable. The fall wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, it was clean, calculated, and final. He had underestimated me, and in doing so, he had destroyed himself. When it was all over, I didn't feel like a victor. I didn't walk away with fireworks or confetti. I walked away with silence. The kind of silence that comes when you finally stop fighting a battle you never asked for. And that silence was worth more than any promotion or paycheck my old boss could have ever offered me. In the weeks after, I settled into my new office, smaller but warmer, surrounded not by politics or egos, but by people who valued me for who I was and what I brought to the table. My clients followed through on their promises. Every account transfer went through smoothly. Every handshake reaffirmed what I had built. Loyalty doesn't need speeches. It doesn't need contracts. It's proven in the moments when people choose to stand with you, even when they don't have to. $41 million. That was the headline number, the one people whispered about. But for me, the number was never the victory. The victory was the truth it represented. It was proof that years of honesty, long nights, tough conversations, and personal sacrifice had meant something. Proof that I wasn't replaceable. Proof that no one can erase trust once it's earned. My old boss, from what I've heard, still works at that firm. His reputation never fully recovered. When clients pulled away, when colleagues whispered behind his back, he learned a truth he'll never forget. Respect can't be demanded. It has to be earned. And once you lose it, you don't get it back. As for me, life is quieter now. I make time for things I used to sacrifice. Dinners with family, weekends without emails, mornings where I don't feel the weight of someone else's agenda on my shoulders. I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living. And that, more than the mansion, more than the office, more than the money, is what makes me feel rich. Looking back, I don't regret the years I gave to that company. They taught me patience. They taught me discipline. And in the end, they gave me the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone else. It's proving to yourself that you were never what they said you were. I was never replaceable, and neither are you. So if you're sitting in your own version of that office right now, being told you're not good enough, being treated like you don't matter, remember my story. Remember that loyalty, honesty, and hard work create roots so deep that no one can rip them out. Stay patient. Stay observant. And when the time comes, act with precision. Because the calmest person in the room is usually the one who already knows how the story will end. Shedding betrayal, reclaiming your worth, finding peace after the storm, that's the real victory. And it's a victory no one can take away from you. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own struggles or gave you strength to keep moving forward, I want you to do one thing. Share it. Subscribe for more stories like this. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And let's build a space where people who've been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed can finally be heard. Because, trust me, you are not replaceable.